Hello, podcast user. This is your host with the most, and we're celebrating today because it is 350, episode 350, and we're going to talk a little bit about the ultimate list that we'd put together for sitcoms. We're going to talk about phrases that we like, and we're going to eat outside. So there's a lot going on in this episode. I believe this is our first outdoor episode of JJ Meets World, so if you hear the sounds of nature, it's not some weird filter Tucker put on there. We're actually in nature. There's a bee. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
I'm chewing some bacon because we're having breakfast outside while we record episode 350. Tucker just bit into his egg sandwich, and look at that delightful dribble of yolk that came out of it.
So much, dude.
Did it work out well?
Tastes so good, man.
So last summer, I won a Blackstone griddle, which is an outdoor grill style flat top griddle from my veterinarian because I had to buy heartworm pills for my dogs. And they said for each 6-month supply of heartworm pills, we put you into the jar. And so I said, well, I got to buy 4 6-month packs, 2 for Neely, 2 for George. And I got a call the next week, and they're like, congratulations, you won it. And it was the Blackstone griddle, and it was a Yeti knockoff cooler and 2 camping chairs. So I gave the camping chairs and the cooler to my father-in-law because I'm just not a cooler kind of guy. You know, most places I go, if I need something for a cooler, I've got a little tiny satchel one because I'm not bringing a 36-pack of Busch Light Peach, right?
I just bought a cooler and it broke on me.
What?
Yeah. When I went down to Arkansas, bought a little tiny $20 cooler from Hornbacher's, thinking I'm going to keep sandwiches and this on the road, and I did on the way down. On the way back, something happened to the button, and it will not latch anymore.
What?
And so I just had to toss that thing.
You didn't want to bring it back to Hornbacher's?
Nah.
Be like, I'll take this in deli meat.
No. They would give me the worst deli meat at that point.
So
they would be like, you don't get to pick which kind of deli meat. It's going to be ham.
It's gonna be pit ham, the fattiest of the hams. Do you subscribe to the idea that like our generation is called a throwaway generation? Do you think that like we really are? We just throw away stuff more than previous generations would?
I don't subscribe to that because I think a lot of the, I guess what I could say is all the negative things they say about millennials, you can look around and find examples of millennials who that fits, but you can also find plenty of millennials who that doesn't fit whatsoever. And so I think we're less broadly defined as one generation versus types of inside of that generation. I think you and I come from a spot where we're in that crossover between Gen X and millennial. So while we're millennials, we're really considered zennials on some level, which is a bit different. But it's hard for me to understand. Like, I was hanging out with another millennial yesterday who's a solid, I think, 10 years younger than me. And he talked about his sister and called her, she's a Gen Zer. And I'm like, good Lord, are we already looking down on Gen Z now? And what comes after Gen Z? Like, is Gen Z already looking down at kids in kindergarten and be like, these people, they got it easy. They're going to grow up with AI.
I would consider myself part of the Pepsi generation. That was a brilliant marketing campaign, by the way.
Do you think that's what they thought they were going to be tapping into when they did the Kylie Jenner Black Lives Matter one?
Definitely.
Which gave us one of the greatest SNL skits of all time.
Okay. Last night I'm at a pool party, and the conversation turns to name your top 3 characters from television of all time. And I said, well, it's interesting because on JJ Meets World, by the way, happy episode 350, Tucker.
350 all day, every day.
Tree Fitty, as I like to refer to the number 350. I was like, okay, well, this is a tough thing because Tucker and I on JJ Meets World did a Mount Rushmore of sketch comedy troupes, and picking 4 is tough. Picking 3 even more difficult.
We're talking characters from sketch comedy?
No, we're talking about characters from TV, period.
Oh, okay. And it's top 3?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I know my number 1 right off the bat.
Tony Soprano.
Absolutely. There's just no question in my mind.
He only got added to one person's top 3.
That person is a hero.
It was my brother-in-law, Brady.
Good job, Brady.
I had started with us talking about Breaking Bad and how iconic Breaking Bad is, but I got to be honest, I actually like Better Call Saul more than I like Breaking Bad.
I've heard that a lot. Although the scenes I've seen from Better Call Saul, it just feels like it's more Breaking Bad, doesn't it? Like, oh, let's fill in this point. Let's tell the story of when Mike goes and actually gets hired to do this thing, and
it for Better Call Saul to run, Breaking Bad had to learn how to walk, right? And so, yes, it does feel like an extension. And let's face it, I think Breaking Bad got, in a rare twist, it actually gets better as the series goes on because they decide they're going to explore more than just he's a teacher making meth and get him involved in the mob. And then you get a character like Gus. So I took some guff on this, but I said, listen, I'm going to put Will Ferrell on there as any character he played on SNL. And I said, I think it's important that we include that one. They're like, but that's more than one character. And I'm like, right, but it's one person on one show.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to get into the nitty gritty of that, you would be like, you'd not be able to include any of the like characters who get amnesia or anything like that.
You could really call it Will Ferrell as Will Ferrell.
Right, exactly. And I said, I think that he came along at a pivotal time in SNL's career. Then I chose Don Draper because I'm just finishing my most recent watch through, which we discussed on a couple podcasts ago. And then the one that everyone groaned at, but I'm like, you got to really think about it, is I'm like, Homer J. Simpson.
Oh, that's a strong choice.
Right? Because nobody was looking at the fact that, like, this character redefined. So
if you don't have Homer Simpson, you don't get Peter Griffin, you don't get King of the Hill.
To some extent, I don't think you get modern sitcom dads.
Right, because it wasn't The Simpsons itself, it was Homer. It was that particular, because, I mean, they were lampooning sitcom fathers at that point, but then took it to a salacious, I remember my mom not letting me watch The Simpsons purely because Homer Simpson would physically abuse Bart. He was an alcoholic, and like that was a big running gag. But he was also someone who there was really no consequences to his actions.
He was horribly lazy,
which gave us one of the greatest episodes of all time with Grimy.
Oh God!
I mean,
I listened to a podcast where they call it the Frank Grimes of it all, and they use that term over and over. In the pool yesterday, someone quoted this: "Sir, our seats are not built for a man of your stature, but we'd like to give you a garbage bag full of popcorn." I'm like, I just watched the episode where Homer becomes so obese he cannot go into work.
He wears like a muumuu or something.
Yeah, and the brilliance of like rewatching The Simpsons as an adult. So I've seen all of these episodes 5 or 6 times because they aired 2 every single day from 5 to 6 o'clock on Fox during the heyday of my life, where I came home and I want to watch TV before dinner. And
they're still squeezing blood out of that stone.
They are, and like Disney Plus is getting a ton of action out of them.
I'm thinking about, are we trying to make a top 3 list that's more like a personal preference, or are we trying to make a historical argument? Because right now, if I were to go just personal preference, I think for me it would be Tony Soprano and then Beavis and Butthead. Because Beavis and Butthead, to this day, they're doing the same shtick, and it makes me laugh just as hard as it did back then. And of course, as a kid, I worshiped them because they were forbidden, right? They were absolute. Both my parents were like, you do not watch this. And I remember for there was one of my dad's houses we were living at, there was a period of like 3 months where we suddenly had cable. And I had a TV in my room. And so at night, I would turn on the TV real low so I could watch Beavis and Butthead. If I thought I heard like a cough or something, I'd turn it off real quick or turn the volume all the way down. And so that just felt like I feel like being forbidden something like that as a kid and then getting access to it is sort of a rite of passage. And that made so much of an impression on me that for me, I think it's T Soprano and then B and B.
So you're going to give up your third by having Beavis and Butthead, or you're lumping them together?
I mean, no, I'm giving, but it feels like I should be giving them.
You can lump them
I
together.
can lump them together because I mean they are two separate characters, but they go together, and they're always, and it's one guy playing them, right?
Right.
So if we're doing the kind of the Will Ferrell thing, then Beavis and Butthead's on there for me with Tony Soprano. So then I got to think of my number 3.
I also think that to some extent, you can say like, okay, for me, I was like, I'm trying to think as far back as I possibly can because, a show like The Honeymooners, right?
Right.
Jackie Gleason having that huge impact. And then you could go and say like, well, what about Lucille Ball? Lucille Ball changed the way television comedy was, taken into homes. And I'm like, you're not wrong on all of this stuff. But I think the nice thing about this list is it comes down to personal preference, right? And so for that, Lucille Ball sets the state for everyone like Carol Burnett, the female side of the cast of Friends, all these things. But I don't have to necessarily include that because Lucille was not of my generation. I wasn't sitting there consuming that and being part of that, that bubble.
Right. I'm thinking about all the shows that I love where I go, there are amazing characters that could belong on anyone's top whatever list, Stringer Bell from The Wire is an immaculately written character, and he has a tremendous, wonderful arc, the tragic arc that you watch him go through. There's so many characters like that I kind of go, what would I want to put on there? But you also kind of want to balance it out, not just you want to balance it out with the eras that they're from on some level, right? Mm-hmm. Do you remember when Nick at Night had a massive marathon for like a week of Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie?
Yeah.
And you could call in and vote on who was more powerful.
Uh-huh.
I was Team Samantha. I was Team Bewitched.
Yeah.
But that's because I was in love with her. Like I wanted to watch, oh, you've got a butterfly back here. I keep hearing all these things about people not having butterflies anymore in their backyards, and a beautiful little yellow.
It's mechanical.
Okay, Tyrell Corporation.
Yep, it's a.
Do you like our owl?
When I walked out here today, so my dogs are up in Hillsboro right now, and when I walked out today, there were like 4 rabbits and a bunch of birds that flew away, and I was like, did I just walk into like Cinderella? Like, what's going on here?
Before we continue, would you mind if I went and refilled my coffee somehow?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just going to let this roll, and I'll cut out.
Here, allow me.
All right, we took a little break. JJ's walking back with the coffee. JJ, as you were being a gracious host and making me a new cup of coffee, I thought of a few more that I'm struggling between who I should pick for my third. And so one, which is a really strong candidate, I think, is Bugs Bunny.
Sure.
Really strong candidate because, again, we're talking about, characters that sort of set the stage for other characters. And I mean, Looney Tunes in general really is what set the stage, but their flagship character was always Bugs Bunny. 2 was Commander Spock from the original Star Trek, which I think is a strong choice. An iconic character in the first, I shouldn't say was Battlestar Galactica before Star Trek? I think it was.
I believe it was, yeah.
But Star Trek, I think, took off in a way that Battlestar just didn't. And so I think it was the first maybe crossover success in sci-fi. And the third is Triumph the Insult Comic Dog from Conan O'Brien. I was going to go with the Masturbating Bear, but then I realized, well, you can't do that when Triumph is on the same show. In Triumph, I always go back to that the episode 1 line of Fans Outside and the roasting he did of that, which is comedy gold from beginning to end.
Which of these buttons do you push to call your mom to pick you up?
And the guy who shows up dressed up like Gandalf, and he's like, I'll let you finish your filet of fish sandwich.
One of the brilliant things about Triumph is he, the I keyed, and like he does it, But I forget the name of the comedian who
Robert Smigel.
Robert Smigel, yeah. He does such a great job because he is himself
Mm-hmm.
a nerd, so he's able to like chomp onto these little aspects.
Well, I think that just the cheapness of it as well, because you can see the arm, you know, the cigar falls out of the mouth all the time. just how kind of shitty the puppet is part of what makes it that funny.
Do you think that it's hard to pick the top 3 because you're comparing comedy to drama to sitcoms to hour-long HBO cable versus network?
Part of me, I think part of what I'm judging it by for myself is what would I be in the mood to sit down and watch at any time, right? What never gets old for me. And watching Tony Soprano never gets old for me. I can watch Gandolfini chew the scenery over and over and over again and breathe heavy through his nose and talk about the gabagool and say every swear word on planet Earth. No one says it the way Tony says it, right? And so, I mean, I worship at the altar of James Gandolfini as Tony Soprano. Beavis and Butthead, they're still just as funny to me as they were then. I cannot help but laugh when I hear their laughing begin. Like those moments where they're not even in the scene yet, but then you can hear them approaching. I fucking lose my mind every time that happens. And I don't know why I have this Pavlovian response to it, but I just do.
Sure.
So I'm judging based off of, for me, if I'm on a deserted island or I'm marooned on a distant planet and I can pick, 3 TV shows that I want to always have to watch. Sopranos and Beavis and Butthead are going to be in there. I got to figure out what my number 3 is.
So I could watch the show Community over and over and over again. And in a way it's the most modern probably thing that's on my list, but it forces its way on. But to me it's like, well, there's not a single character on there who really defines, and I had kind of the trouble with The Simpsons, right? Because all of the family have episodes that put themselves into a next level. But in this case, I'm like, oh, I've got like Homer is just the thing that drives the car.
Yeah.
But Community is such a cast heavy show where, well, okay, so you might say Joel McHale, but like, but is Joel McHale the thing that brings you the most joy out of everything? Like, but without those elements together. And this conversation was brought up when one of the guests at the pool party wanted to put Friends on the list, but didn't know which friend to choose.
Okay.
Because, yeah, if you say David Schwimmer, it's like, yeah, but what about all of those Joey episodes? Or what about the Phoebe heavy episodes? And it got into a conversation about, like, they're like, well, JJ, because you like Friends, right? And I said, I've probably seen 50% of the episodes of Friends, but I haven't seen them all, and I certainly don't have them memorized like a lot of people do. And it's not because I dislike the show. It's just because it didn't capture me as much.
Right. Funny thing with Friends and Simpsons, that play I directed about The Simpsons at Theater B, that was originally supposed to be about Friends. When they were first writing the script, they thought, well, the idea is that it's Friends, but then they kind of realized that Friends doesn't have the same level of sort of pop culture carryover in a visual sense, and that Simpsons was almost more universal on some level because Bart Simpson was known in every country on planet Earth. Homer Simpson is almost like Steve Urkel in that the Simpsons creators thought Bart was going to be the center of attention, and he was on some level for a good period of time. Greg Carlson talks lovingly about the Eat My Shorts days when everyone had a T-shirt that said Eat My Shorts on it. But quickly, Homer became the fan favorite, and then it became a more Homer-centered show in much the same way that the Steve Urkel zeitgeist really changed the direction of Family Matters.
This is the second episode in a row we've talked about Family Matters.
And it's not on either of our lists.
Nope.
Steve Urkel does not belong on this list. Even though he had his own serial. Like characters who had their own cereal, that does give them a level of prestige. So the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, obviously, they might be my number 3. In all honesty, that's probably what I should go to for my own personal taste.
I would also say you are also bringing up characters that not only existed on the television screen, but made the jump to the big screen. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Beavis and Butthead. I still stand by Beavis and Butthead Do America. From what was that, 1997?
Yeah.
The movie still to this day is perfect.
It is such a perfect example of how you adapt these TV characters to a film, because they have an arc. They have a very clear mission that is in keeping with them. I still love the scene where they've woken up to find the TV missing and watching Butthead like try to do the math of what's happened.
He sees broken glass, like a brick,
like footprints.
And then the TV's gone.
Yeah, like footprints on the ground. And then his conclusion is that this sucks. I think that's one of the things about Beavis and Butthead that's awesome, is that everything in their world falls into two categories. Either it rules or it sucks. And so, and that's kind of true. That is kind of true. You know, I kind of arrange things in that order as well. So for me, it's probably the Ninja Turtles. It would have to be, because I discovered them on TV. I remember distinctly the first frame of TV of theirs that I saw. We were living in Grandin, North Dakota, and there was a house that was working as like a daycare. So we were over there one day, and the only thing I really knew about at that point was like Mickey Mouse, Superman, Masters of the Universe. So I knew about He-Man. That's really all I knew about. And I remember playing with like a Skeletor and a He-Man and looking up at the TV and seeing Donatello, like a close-up of Donatello's face. And then shortly after that, it was Shredder. And being like, the moment of putting down the He-Mans to be like, what is this I'm watching? And just being forever obsessed ever since then.
Which is interesting because like you have less in common with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles than you do with, what's his name?
Tony Soprano?
No, I was going to say He-Man's. What's his Prince?
Oh, Prince. I don't know.
See, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I called Skeletor Skeleton Man at that time.
Did you have like a grocery store knockoff of?
No, I had a Skeletor.
It was an actual Skeletor,
but it was probably from a garage sale, or probably from one. I had older cousins who had every toy on the planet. One of them, Shay, I loved going to his house because he had a massive box filled with GI Joes. Every GI Joe, every vehicle, even like this. I feel like there was like a large battleship cruiser set or something. It just felt like this guy had every single toy. And I thought it was amazing, but GI Joes weren't necessarily the thing. It was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which, by the way, I still have every single one of my action figures from childhood.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm holding on to them for if I ever have kids, then they will have them. But in the meantime,
or you get in deep to the mafia, and then I can like trade it off,
or the world economy collapses.
There you go.
The new currency is backed by old action figures.
You're not far off. That is a real possibility,
right?
I want to tell you,
is on its way.
A story that happened. I told this yesterday, and it really, like, I've been thinking about it since I told the story, but we had a horrible IT guy at one point at my work.
Does he listen to this podcast?
No, and he no longer works for us either. We had a really good one who does listen to this podcast, and I miss him a lot. And so this guy's one of those dudes who, like, made you feel stupid.
Right.
He was
an IT guy.
He was an IT guy, right? Like the typical IT guy, like the one that they portray in Saturday Night Live. Like, anyway, so he came over and he was talking to a coworker of mine, and he said something so condescending about how they don't understand a simple thing, like, on this. And my coworker immediately jumped back with like, how many congressional votes does it take to ratify a bill? See, you're stupid too.
That's a great line.
It was, and I'm like,
that is a great line.
It's the type of thing where like it's locked and loaded and ready to roll, in the moment. And I really got a kick in like witnessing it. I went, oh, because like
that's an oh snap moment. That's a you just got served in a rap battle moment.
And it was to the point where it was like, see, this is why nobody wants to. First of all, you've made yourself so prickly that no one wants to come to you for help.
Yep.
And so when you complain, like, why didn't you just ask right away to get this done? It's like, well, because you're such a dick.
Yeah, you make it unpleasant.
And so I was thinking about that recently because I'm setting up my home network in a different way. And I've really chosen not to go with a mesh Wi-Fi, and I don't know why, because I think it would be perfect for my house. But instead, I'm using these, we've talked about them before, where it uses the existing electrical grid in my house instead of running like Cat 5.
It's basically
Ethernet
turning that into cable. Okay.
And it's awesome. I'm not going to lie. It is friggin' awesome. The problem is that like I really need that for things like Jill's workspace from when she's working from home, because I can actually plug in an Ethernet cable. It's great for my smart TVs because I can plug in an Ethernet cable. But we are becoming a world where these things are slowly disappearing. And it's like, I remember the era where they were phasing out things like S-Video and like the red, white, and yellow AV cords and stuff like that, and going only to HDMI. And I was really thinking to myself, I was like, oh God, I'm living in a world where Ethernet ports are becoming like, you don't really need them anymore. You know, we've figured out Wi-Fi to the point of where it's like this, but so, and I've put probably like $150 into this network I've built in my house, right? And so the company I use, TP-Link, I'm not afraid to say it. In fact, if they want to give us some sponsorship money, I'm really good at it.
That's your ISP?
No, that TP-Link is the name of the brand of these plugins.
I was like, there's another ISP that I'm unaware of.
No. Internet service provider, for those of you who don't speak the lingo. Oh, by the way, just real quick. So I went to Barbenheimer on Thursday. We did a double feature of Barbie and then Oppenheimer. And I know everyone loves Christopher Nolan and thinks he's so great. And I'm like, did you see Tenet? But he does something. He pulls a full-on IT guy in this, and he really makes you feel stupid if you don't know everything about the governmental works of that era. For 9/10 of this movie, they refer to the AEC. Well, you remember the AEC. Well, the AEC is getting together tonight, and it goes on and on and on. And I was like, why do I feel like such an idiot? Because at one point he puts on a chalkboard like FAECT, and it was about unionizing. And I'm like, so is this like a union thing? And at the very end, they're like, well, when I sat on the AEC, that's the Atomic Energy Commission.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh, I did not know that. And it made me feel stupid. And so, Christopher Nolan, I get it.
Yeah.
You think you're so smart and you're so good, but you know what? It might be a little bit of, and I did enjoy Oppenheimer, by the way.
Okay.
Like, I found it to be very intriguing. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't care about being spoken down to.
Sure.
By the man who made The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah. I've always been lukewarm in general on Nolan. Not that I have a problem with him, but I don't slobber on his knob the way a lot of people tend to do.
People love him.
Especially the actors doing press for his movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't really, get too overwhelmed by him in general. And yeah, sometimes I just feel like, this wasn't that good, but good enough.
I remember when I saw what's the one with like the inverted dreams?
Oh,
that everyone Inception. I remember seeing Inception and being like, yeah, it's a cool concept. I mean, it was hard for me to follow at parts, and everyone was like, well, here's what you have to understand first. And I'm like, if I need to take a class before I go see this thing, they didn't accomplish the job,
right?
Because he's not making a documentary. He's making something that's meant for my enjoyment and entertainment. And if you're going to limit the amount of people who can see it by having to have this background, you're going to, I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but like the thing that makes Barbie so great is everyone knows what Barbie is. And so because everyone knows what Barbie is, they can play with that.
Right.
And they can change like what we expect from it.
Yeah.
I'm
looking forward to Oppenheimer because the subject matter, I think, is incredibly fascinating. And so getting to see a recreation of what that must have been like. I am really interested in historical fiction movies where they're basically trying to give you, this might have been what it felt like to be there in that moment. And those kinds of historical movies, I really, really dig. So the notion of creating basically a civilization killing bomb and how scary that is, how scary that must have been. And it also just reminds me of how we don't really think about it in terms of that much these days, but we're looking at AI in a similar fashion, right? Of this ghost in the box that we're about to let out.
It's ironic because battling for the box office is Oppenheimer, which is, like you said, about the release of the atomic bomb, and Mission Impossible, which is all about an AI that essentially takes over and says, like, I can computate any outcome, and I can destroy the world if I want to.
So do we have your top three right now? What were your first two again?
It is Don Draper, Will Ferrell,
Okay.
and Homer J. Simpson.
That's okay. Yeah, there we go. And for me, it's Tony Soprano, Beavis and Butthead, the Ninja Turtles, which is technically 7 characters.
Mm-hmm.
But let me go through those and pick specific ones from those groups.
Okay.
Just to be a little more fair. So Tony Soprano,
Mm-hmm.
Beavis,
Oh,
Michelangelo. Yeah, I think
party dude.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about Ninja Turtles growing up was that you loved all 4 of them because their personalities were so different. You could relate to each of them at a different period of time, right? So if you're feeling really nerdy and geeky about something, you want to learn about facts, you feel like Donatello. If you feel like letting your hair down and cutting loose and just having a chill time, you're Michelangelo, right? If you saw someone get bullied on the playground and you want to go tattle on them, which I did a lot,
You're Leonardo.
And if you're just frustrated and angry, especially when you're going through puberty, Raphael. Like
Your angst.
Your angst is there. But right now, as an adult, I go back to Michelangelo as the one that I think is sort of the purest of spirit. But I also make the argument that he's the best fighter of the 4 and doesn't get his just desserts for that, because people will think, oh, it's Leonardo because of his discipline, or it's Raphael because of his brute strength. But I think it's Michelangelo because of his skill, because he's those nunchucks, to be able to actually use those in battle and not harm yourself. Because, if you're ever a kid and you grab a set of toy nunchucks and you try to flick them around, within 2 seconds you're going to hit
Boom.
yourself in the head.
You need like super long arms.
Yeah.
And like you're only, you're essentially giving them a bigger target to hit because you're putting your arms out there, windmill style.
They're so dangerous they banned them showing in England.
Yeah.
And so Ninja Turtles, he couldn't have his weapon with him, and they had to call themselves Hero Turtles as well. So I think Michelangelo takes it.
Well, and is it in the second one to be able to make it releasable? Like you'll notice that Michelangelo never actually uses
he uses
sausages and a yo-yo.
Yeah. And as a kid, I didn't really notice that much. I was still having a great time
You
watching.
probably thought it
Ninja
was
Turtles.
cooler.
I thought it was hilarious. I thought that's so funny that he did that. But because then I would just go off in my imagination and play as Michelangelo all day. But as a kid, I fixated on Donatello right away, and he was who I dressed up as in the 1st grade for Halloween. But then Raphael...
Shout out to Mama Luke for that
Shout
costume.
out to Mama Luke up in heaven looking down on us saying, well, now let me tell you.
Let me tell you.
But there's the scene that I still love and will rewatch from the first Turtles movie is when Raphael saves April in the subway, because he defeats a whole team of foot soldiers in like 3 moves, right? Very simple choreography, but the way it's shot and produced, it's like visceral. The sound of Raphael's, ki as he's coming out to attack, the shock of the foot soldiers going, what the fuck is this thing coming at us right now? And the fact that it just takes him a couple of moves and he knocks them all out, and then he rescues April. Judith Hoag, shout out.
Judith Hoag goes on to be in the show Big Love about polygamy.
Ooh.
And her sister is a polygamist, and she's LDS, and she doesn't agree with her sister being a polygamist. And I'm like, oh, April O'Neil's got some real opinions. Like, good for her.
Her April was awesome. Like, it felt like her and the tension between her and Casey Jones was palpable.
It was.
And they've never been able to recreate that in the fucking Megan Fox and what's his nuts Green Arrow guy.
No, thank you. I also didn't care for the forced Sarah Michelle Gellar, Freddie Prinze Jr. in the animated, like TMNT from 2003, I think.
Yeah.
I also want to throw out there that I am a big fan of a lot of TV shows, and like there's single episodes and there's side characters that I think are very worthy. But if you're saying like who needs to be on a giant, like it has to have a pillar raising to the sky for them when it comes to picking these characters, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's difficult. And what I think is most interesting is that people will argue up and down, and they'll like evangelize. They'll be like, you're wrong. It's Kelsey Grammer as Frasier that set the tone, and it was, high society comedy, and like you're crazy that you don't think that you're not including him on there. Have I ever told you about the Frasier Facebook fan group I'm a part of?
No.
So my sister during the pandemic discovered Frasier. Now she had watched it probably a couple times, but it certainly wasn't something that she watched when it was airing, right? Like a lot. Probably just because there were other NBC shows that it was sandwiched between. She wanted to watch Friends and then wanted to watch ER, but to bridge to ER, you had to watch Frasier. So Chrissy gets into it, and Chrissy falls in love with that show. She can't get enough of Frasier. She loves Frasier so much that she buys them all on digital.
Damn.
And is like, it's her like show that she'll just pop on whenever.
Sure.
She goes like, I'll
Comfort
sit there
food.
and I'll laugh and I'll be crying. I'm laughing so hard. And I was like, over Frasier? Okay. And so she joined a Frasier Facebook fan group, and she would post on there. Like, she would regularly post, like, when people were having discussions about, like, which one of Frasier's suits is the best suit.
Yeah. I celebrate this about Chrissy.
Me
That's
too.
awesome.
Me too. And so at one point for her birthday, her husband got her a sign that must be like the coffee shop they go to, but it's a neon sign that she could hang in her office. And it was custom made.
That's a good gift.
And so she posted about it in the Frasier fan group. And she goes, JJ, it's the first thing I've ever done that's got like a lot of things. It's got 150 likes already.
Good for her.
And all strangers, right? Because it's
Yep.
all this. So I said, I got to check this out. And so she sent me a link, but I couldn't get in because I wasn't part of the group. So I was like, I'll just like the group and I can unlike it tomorrow.
Sure.
I had to fill out a questionnaire about who I was, and not just like pick one or two. They were essay style, and it included 5 specific Frasier questions, like, describe Frasier's dad's chair. And I said,
wow.
it's a Barcalounger that's got some duct tape on it. Clearly, that wasn't enough, because then I go into like, which one of Frasier's girlfriends is the best? And I'm like, Jean Smart, and she's only in 2 like episodes, right? So I get a message from the moderator saying, at this time, we can't include you because we don't think that you are. This is for deep fans of of Frasier. And so I go, I just got bounced out of the Frasier fan club on Facebook. And so 7 months later, I got another message that said, we've reviewed what you've said, and we would like
7-month review process.
Right? We're going to offer you a slot. And so you can be in the Frasier fan club. And so I'm on it, and now like I'm afraid to unfriend it because that gate will never be open to me again.
I just the gatekeeping of the Frasier fan club.
Right? Like, you're so worried about people getting on here and ruining the Frasier experience.
That's a great episode title, Gatekeeping the Frasier fan club. I think we're going to go with that for episode 350. Let's talk about just for a second before we wrap up about how fucking awesome it is.
350.
That we've hit 350. We started this podcast in January of 2018.
Wow.
And here it is, July 2023. JJ and I have some really big plans for this thing in the next coming year that we'll reveal over time. But
Yeah, so it's funny you say that, Tucker, because I thought, well, the evolution of this podcast has been interesting, and I don't think I've received any negative feedback, and I don't know if you have. Every time we've changed it up,
Yeah.
I've had people tell me, like, actually, like, oh, yeah, I really like what you guys did with this.
Yeah.
And so while we are not like the Gmail interface where every time it's new, people hate it, we are going to swap some things. And we've been talking about, like, okay, so the hangout style that we've been doing was born more or less because of the pandemic.
Right.
And the infrequency of being able to get guests
Yep.
and those type of things.
Yep.
And I've really come to enjoy this hangout style. And a lot of people say, like, yeah, it's just a little more frustrating because I want to add to your conversation and I'm unable to.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really excited for what we've kind of come up with going ahead. And it's not just audio. We've talked about a visual component that we want to add to this. But to those people, whether this is the 5th episode you've listened to 100 episodes. Is there anybody who's listened to all 350 outside of you and I?
I bet there are a few out there
think so?
because we have, a few people that we hear from regularly who are sort of super fans in the show. And by the way, super fans, we love you guys a lot and keep reaching out because it is really fun to hear that. For us, it can be tough to realize that people listen to it, even though we see the analytics, so we can tell that people are downloading it. But sometimes it can be hard to really appreciate the fact that we're saying things into a microphone that other people will hear sometimes.
And that that they are anxious for the next one too, right? Like
Yeah.
they want to like, oh, well, where's this conversation going to go?
But we know we're working on figuring out a new studio location, and we want to start bringing in guests from time to time again, and expanding what it is that we're doing. So I wouldn't say there's really anything we're looking to replace. We're merely looking to expand on this thing because JJ and I have the dream of one day doing this full time as our jobs.
I would love that.
That would be amazing to do. So
And maybe it's we've talked about like, okay, are there spin-offs?
right.
Do we Family Matters
Right.
this podcast for
Right.
Perfect Strangers? Maybe we do.
I think that video element will be the crucial piece, though, too, really. Because, I mean, all the big podcasts that I listen to are also a video element to them, so I can watch them at the same time. And, we keep doing the grind away. We've never lost viewers. We've only gained them. So,
that's good.
so that's nice. So we're just going to keep on keeping on. If you look at the stuff that's out there already that has way bigger audiences than we are, it's not, comparable quality. So
I was interacting in person with a JJ Meets World fan, and he handed me a card, and in the card was some cash money.
oh, nice.
And he explained that he changed, like his credit card renewed, and so he had a new number, and he didn't realize that it wasn't still feeding into our Patreon.
That's
so he wanted to like make up for the money that wasn't there in the Patreon. And I'm like, thank you very much.
That's way nice. I'd love us to really figure out what would be like one killer piece of merch that people would really like to have too. Maybe something that's some kind of a phrase or something. So we got to figure out that kind of side of it as well. We have merch, but it's the logo basically at this point.
At work, I've really tried to, I think I've told you this, I want the phrase roll this pig into the ditch to become like a thing.
Is that like going to be your catchphrase?
I think it should be. And people around work are now starting to use this. And I think it's just to patronize me like a little bit. But I'm like, I'm glad you're using it.
What's the meaning?
So it's let's get this thing started, essentially.
Let's roll this pig into the ditch.
Let's roll this pig into the ditch. And so, or an ending. No, I want it to be the ending. Like that's the ending of something. So
okay.
So it's been a hard day's work. You finished making your barn. Like, let's roll this pig in the ditch and let's pick up your tools.
To me, it sounds like, oh, I'm trying to cross this road, but there's a dead pig in the road.
Right.
Let's roll it into the ditch so we can keep going.
So you can keep going. So you can finish your journey. You get all the way to your long driveway to your country home, and there's a dead boar, and you just got to roll it into the ditch.
This sounds like fetch. Like, stop trying to make fetch happen.
But then fetch did happen.
Then it did happen.
Like that's the irony of that phrase from Mean Girls is that it actually did have a purpose. Okay, let's wrap this up because we ate a delicious breakfast and now we're being swarmed by flies.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're in some greasy spoon in Chicago.
JJ, happy 350.
Happy 350. Do you know what anniversary that is?
No.
No, because human beings don't live to 350. That'd be ridiculous. Robots will celebrate their 350th anniversary. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. We really got him. We recorded this in a sterile room. Bunch of chumps.